Evening on the Cote d'Azur. When she'd packed up the remains of the picnic lunch and got the twins settled in their carriage, Betty Myers looked around for Bobby, her 5-year-old. Squinting against the sun, she finally saw him way up the beach, playing with some French kids. "Bobby," she yelled, but he pretended not to hear and started off to get him, slow with weariness, feeling the alien stares of men and girls who lay all but naked on the sand. When Bobby saw her coming, he took off, and she had to run clumsily after him, knowing she must look a sight with the heavy flesh wobbling in her playsuit. Finally, she caught him and gave him a couple of good hard smacks. He set up an awful howl, but he came along nicely enough, once she had a grip on his wrist. The French kids he'd been playing with backed away shyly, holding their hands to their mouths. She hated to hit him. It always made her feel like hell afterwards, but he'd been asking for it all afternoon. He stopped crying by the time they got back on the promenade, still snuffling, but she could tell the worst was over. "All right, now, listen," she said. "Do you have to go? Because if you do, speak up now. I don't want you bothering me all the way home. Do you?" "No, Ma." "All right then, come on." Pushing the twins' carriage, with Bobby walking beside her, she began the long trip back to the apartment, past the palm trees and sidewalk cafes, past the little bars around the yacht basin with their signs saying "Welcome U.S. Navy and Marines." As far as Betty Myers was concerned, if the French could keep their Riviera, they could take their whole lousy country and turn it over to the communists tomorrow, for that matter, and she'd say good riddance. All she wanted was to be back in Bayonne, New Jersey, where she belonged. Oh, she knew the Sixth Fleet was supposed to be a good deal and everything. Some of the other Navy wives made her sick the way they carried on about it. "You mean you don't like it here? Don't you think it's beautiful?" But you could always be sure the ones who talked that way were the ones that didn't have any kids. They could lie around rubbing sun lotion all over themselves in those sexy little bikini bathing suits, sucking up to the officers' wives and having a high old time. They could even learn French and at least be able to talk to people. Maybe keep from getting cheated every time they went into a store, but what could she do? "Hey, Ma, buy me an ice cream," Bobby said. He sure got over his grief in a hurry. "Buy me an ice cream, Ma." "Come on," she told him. "Come on, we can't stop now." They went around to the Hotel de Ville and cut across the intersection where you always took your life in your hands. What with the way these people tore around with their damn motorcycles and their funny little cars. When they climbed the hill through the slummy part of town and came out on the highway, loud with trucks and buses, that was the last leg of the journey. She always had to steer the carriage with one hand here and hang on to Bobby with the other, because once he had run ahead, got off the sidewalk, and trucks were coming and practically given her heart failure. "Hey, Ma, you're hurting my arm." "I'll hurt it a lot worse if you don't start acting your age. Get your hands off that carriage." "Hey, Ma, what is it now?" "I have to go, Ma." And then the twins started to yell. At last she turned off into the quiet garden of the apartment house. It was a big white slab of a house set back from the road in a grove of royal palms. It was supposed to have been a luxury hotel before the war, but Betty didn't care if it had been the castle of the King of France. She hated the place. For one thing, her apartment was too small, even now with Eddie at sea. And for another thing, she'd never met such snooty people in her life as the people who lived in that house. Even the concierge, and who the hell did she think she was, acted like it was costing her money every time she said hello. It didn't seem to be anything personal, because Mary Lou Smith, the other Navy wife who lived there, got the same treatment. They just had some grudge against Americans, and they sure didn't care who knew it. There was the usual trouble with Bobby in the elevator. He always wanted to stick his fingers through the cage when it was moving, and by the time Betty got the carriage wheeled into the apartment, she was just about ready to sit down and cry. It wasn't until she'd slammed the door that she noticed somebody had shoved a piece of paper underneath it. The handwriting looked so foreign that at first she thought it was written in French. Then she made out the words, "Make your infants be more quiet, if you please. I receive many complaints, concierge." Well, that did it. The hot tears ran down her nose as she bent over the stove to fix the twins' bottles. and she had to turn away so Bobby wouldn't see the puckering of her face. These damn people. This damn country. She had never been so lonely in her life. Hey, Mom, what are you crying about? I'm not. None of your business. Go away now, will you please, Bobby? The doorbell rang and she wiped her face quickly, hurrying to answer it. Hi, Betty, Mary Lou Smith said in her sleepy southern way. She came in all dressed up as usual, dragging Brenda, her 6-year-old. Boy, am I glad to see you, Betty said, and the funny part was it was true. She didn't even like Mary Lou much, but their husbands were shipmates, and Mary Lou was about the closest thing to a friend she'd had since she came overseas. Honestly, I'm going to go nuts if I have to stay in this country one more minute. Look at this. Look what that damn little low-life concierge had the nerve to stick under my door. Mary Lou read the note slowly, aloud, and dropped it on the table. Oh, that. This the first one of them you go. This the first one of them y'all got? We get them all the time. I don't pay no attention anymore. That was something anyway. At least she wasn't the only one. Mary Lou strolled to a mirror and touched up her hair. Where y'all been all day, Betty? Been looking all over for you. Oh, down to the beach. Yeah? You should have told me you was going down. I'd have come along. Don't much like going down there by myself. Mary Lou didn't much like doing anything by herself. As a matter of fact, that was one of the annoying things about her. She was like a helpless kid. Had to have somebody with her all the time. Listen, Betty, let's have supper together tonight, okay? I got this big old roast pork and we can cook it in your place, okay? Okay, Betty said. Another time she might have thought up an excuse, but tonight it seemed like a good idea. At least she'd have somebody to talk to. I'll go get all the stuff then, Mary Lou said and started for the door, trailing perfume. Betty couldn't understand why she always dressed up like that. Nylons, heels, a tight skirt, just for sitting around the house. Maybe Southern girls were different, but it seemed funny. Now you stay here and play, Brenda, Mary Lou said, shaking her finger, and don't you get into no trouble while I'm gone here. But Brenda was already in trouble. She had picked up one of Bobby's toys, a broken sailboat, and when Bobby grabbed for it, she gave him a shove that sat him on the floor. She was a mean one, that Brenda. You watch your manners, you hear? Mary Lou said. She swung at her, missing, awkwardly stooping in the tight skirt. Brenda skittered away out of reach, still holding the sailboat, and started acting up. I'm going to tell Daddy on you, she told her mother, fresh as you please. What are you going to tell him? Mary Lou demanded, hands on her hips. It was funny to watch them together. They were like two little kids. You're so smart. What are you going to tell him? About your boyfriend, Brenda said, and this time Mary Lou didn't miss. In 2 quick, high-heeled steps, she bore down on the little girl and hit her so hard the sailboat fell on the floor. Don't you tell no lies, you little liar, she yelled over Brenda's howling. I'll teach you to go telling lies. Well, really, Betty thought, and it was hard to keep from starting this. This would be one to tell Eddie when he came home. He always did say Mary Lou looked like a little tramp. Not that Betty had anything against the girl, and she was no prude or anything, but still, when a person's own kid said something like that, it really made you think. Don't know what gets into that little head of hers, makes her talk that way to her own mother, Mary Lou said. Now you hush your crying, Brenda, and see if you can't act nice, hear? The way it worked out, Betty did all the cooking. Mary Lou just sat around the kitchen smoking cigarettes, not even offering to help set the table. But Betty didn't really mind. At least by doing everything herself, she could be sure it was done right. The dinner itself was a rat race. What with the kids throwing bread and gravy at each other and yelling all the time, and afterwards there were a million dishes to wash. Mary Lou did the drying, which was some help, even though Betty had to keep stopping to show her where the various plates went. But finally they were through and the kids were all put to bed. They put Brenda in the twins' bed and let the twins sleep in their carriage. And they could relax over a cup of coffee in the living room, looking out at the evening sea through all the tall trunks of the royal palms. You got a right pretty view from here, Mary Lou said, squirming contentedly on the couch. I like it a whole lot better than the one we got. Yeah, it's nice, Betty said, but I don't know. I'm so used to it now, I don't hardly notice it anymore. Might just as well be wallpaper or something. When Eddie was home, his carrier was anchored within sight of the windows. It had been sort of nice to lie here and see its big silhouette out there on the water. Reassuring, as if it were there to watch over her. Now a different part of the fleet was in, and the bay was crowded with smaller, funny-looking ships. Minesweepers, she thought. 6 more weeks, she said. Right? Is that all there? Is that all it is? 6 weeks? I thought it was 7. No, let me see. Mary Lou counted her red fingernails. Yeah, you're right. 6 weeks. God, I can hardly wait, can you? But even as she said it, Betty knew it was only partly true. Lonely or not, she was no fool, and she remembered the last leave well enough. Eddie complaining, "Can't you keep this place clean?" and worrying about the kids messing up his damn precious dress blues. And the evenings. Play cards and quarrel and play cards. Listen, Mary Lou, this time when they're home, what do you say we go out more, the 4 of us, instead of sitting around playing canasta every night? Eddie and I only went out twice the whole time he was here last time. And I mean, you need to get out once in a while. Get dressed up and go to one of those nightclubs in town. Maybe just take a walk along the promenade or something. At least get out of the apartment and feel like a human being. Mary Lou gave a little glancing smile that made her look just like Brenda. Don't you like just going out with a girlfriend? Because I was going to say, why don't you and me go out tonight? I don't know, just the 2 of us alone? Mary Lou shrugged, her eyes wide and bland. Why not? She said. A lot of good places to go. There's this one real cute little place called the Hollywood Bar. You've probably seen it. And inside it's just like the States. Everybody's so friendly and all. A lot of the sailors take their wives there. And I mean, it ain't like some of those places you see around. You don't see no whores in there, what they call business girls or anything like that. I don't know, Benny said. Look, I don't want to sound like a prude or anything, Mary Lou, but I got 3 kids and I got a lot of responsibilities. I'd feel kind of funny going out like that. Mary Lou shrugged again and brushed a cigarette ash from her shapely thigh, looking a little hurt. Okay, she said, but it don't seem to me like there's any harm just sitting around having a drink, maybe talking to a boy or something. I know my husband wouldn't mind. Well, no, mine probably wouldn't either. It's just that I'd feel funny about it is all. Why? Well, just because, oh, I guess it's all right if all you do is talk. I mean, she felt foolish, afraid she was blushing. I mean, I hope that it didn't sound like I thought you... But anything she said now would only make it worse, she laughed. Don't mind me, I guess I sound like an old prude or something. I'm sorry. Sure, you're right. This time Mary Lou's shrug was elaborate. Don't make no difference to me, honey. You want to go out? Okay. You don't? That's okay, too. And all at once Betty knew she would go. It was as if she'd had it in the back of her mind all along. All evening, all day. Okay, let's, she said. But listen, we won't stay out long because I don't like leaving the kids alone, okay? And we'll have to wait till we're sure they're asleep before we go. Sure, Mary Lou said. I ain't in no hurry. She settled back and smiled. You ain't going to wear that, are you, honey? Betty laughed, looking down at her wrinkled shorts. God, no. Wouldn't I look a sight? I had to take a bath, too, if we're going out. Listen, help me decide what to wear, Mary Lou, okay? Come on over here to the closet. Lazily, Mary Lou got to her feet and watched as Betty went through her dresses, jangling the wire hangers. I like that one there, she said. That's real cute. This? Betty said. Don't you think it's a little too... I don't know, too formal or something? But already she had decided to wear it. It was her best dress, an expensive black satin that Eddie liked, and she hadn't worn it since the last leave, the night he took her to see a Cary Grant picture that was playing in town. They'd planned it for days, and they'd already paid and sat down at the theater before they discovered the soundtrack was in French. They couldn't understand a word of the whole picture, and she was so disappointed she almost cried. Okay, she said, taking it out. I'll wear this one then. She bathed quickly and put on fresh underwear and nylons. She hadn't worn nylons since the last leave either, and they felt funny on her legs. Then she brushed up her suede pumps, put on the dress, and fixed her face and hair. And when she was ready, she stood posing in the mirror. How do I look? Real cute, Mary Lou told her, but Betty knew it wasn't true, especially when Mary Lou came to stand beside her. Betty would be the first to admit she wasn't much for looks. She was only 30, but she looked a lot older, especially in the body. She never had gotten her figure back after the twins. Her teeth were funny, too, and now her forehead was peeling from a new sunburn, and the powder had only made it worse. She tucked in a few stray hairs and turned away, resigned. Okay, now let's check the kids and then we'll leave. Mary Lou was right about the Hollywood bar. It certainly did take you back to the States. It was long and dark with leather seats and black mirrors, and it even had a jukebox. The man at the cash register greeted Mary Lou by name when they came in, friendly as anything. And though his accent was more English than American, there wasn't anything French about him. They sat down at a little table against the wall, ordered beer, and looked around. The place was loaded with American sailors. Right across the aisle, there were 4 of them. 2 bored-looking chief petty officers and a couple of very young kids, and the others were crowded at the bar. There were hardly any other women. Mary Lou seemed content to just sit there quietly, but Betty felt she had to talk, just make conversation from staring around the room. So she talked, hardly listening to Mary Lou's replies, turning her glass nervously. An odd feeling came over her that was strangely familiar. Tight in the chest, warm, about to giggle. And then she remembered. It was exactly the way she used to feel in Miller's drugstore back in Bayonne, years ago when she and her girlfriends used to stop in there after school to fool around with boys. The thought startled her, and the next thing that happened made it worse. The 2 young sailors from across the aisle got up to go to the men's room, and as they passed, they stared down at her and then at Mary Lou with a funny look in their eyes. Sort of tough and scared at the same time. She didn't like it. Mary Lou, you know what I think? She whispered. I think they think we're a couple of French whores or something. Business girls or whatever you called them. Don't be silly, honey. Why'd they think that? She supposed it was silly, after all. And when she looked up a minute later, she knew it was. The 2 chief petty officers were standing there with the kindliest, most reassuring smiles in the world. Part of the states you girls from. Betty grinned. How'd you know we were Americans? They both laughed, and their laughter was kindly too. Oh, listen, the first one said, I can spot a Navy wife a block away. You're Navy wives, right? I knew it. Part of the states you from? He put the question to Mary Lou this time, and when she said, Raleigh, North Carolina, he burst out laughing. Sure enough. Well, shut me mouth. Through it all, the other men just stood there smiling, and Betty decided she probably liked him better. He was less handsome than the talkative one, but gentler looking, and shy men appealed to her. Listen, the talkative one said. My name's Al, and this here's Tom. You girls don't mind if we sit down, do you? Long as we're all old married people here. Betty and Mary Lou squeezed close together, making room for the men on either side. And it wasn't until he had settled himself beside Betty that Tom, the quiet one, finally spoke. You from the South, too? You didn't tell us yet. His voice was very low, and his lips curled in a bashful smile around the words. He had a big plain face and a little sandy mustache. No, she told him, I'm from Bayonne, New Jersey. My name's Betty, by the way, Betty Myers. Glad to know you, Betty. Mine's Tom Taylor. Bayonne, huh? I've been through Bayonne a couple times. Never stopped there. My home's in Baltimore. Is your wife over there with the fleet too, or is she staying home? Oh no, she's home. We got the 3 kids, you see, and she figured it'd be kind of tough for her over here. Now there's a smart girl, Betty said. Your wife is really smart. Me, I got 3 kids too, but my husband told me all about how wonderful it'd be with the beach and all, and how he'd be home a lot of the time and we'd have a lot of friends, and like a big sucker, I said yes. Now, if there was a boat going home tomorrow, I'd be on it, believe me. How old are your kids? His wallet flipped open in the dim, smoky light, and she bent to look at the snapshots. There was a heavy-set woman of about 35 in a print dress, smiling pleasantly, Tom's wife, and a couple of tow-headed boys in T-shirts grimacing into the sun. The big one's Tom Jr., he's 10 now, and the little one's Barry, he's 6. Then we got a little girl 15 months old. Here, I'll show you. There. I took that when she was only about 6 months. Aw, Betty said, isn't she a darling? Come on, break it up. Al was reaching across Mary Lou and snapping his fingers in front of their eyes. Break it up, you two. What are you going to drink? So they ordered another round, and Mary Lou and Al left the table to dance on the small patch of cleared floor by the jukebox. Care to dance? Tom asked. And as they got up, she noticed that the 2 young sailors were watching them, grinning and nudging each other. It annoyed her. And when they got to the dance floor, she said, Are they friends of yours, those 2? Tom laughed. Them? Nah. They're just a couple of kids from ship. We were just talking to him. He laughed again in his soft, easy way and slipped his hand around her for dancing. These damn young kids you get in the Navy nowadays. These damn young kids you get in the Navy nowadays, they're all the same. You talk to them on Liberty, buy them a beer or something, and right away they think they're in. You know what I mean? They think there's some kind of big deal because Chief buys them a beer. He held her stiffly at first, well away from his body, hardly touching her back with his hand. I get kind of a kick out of that one on the right, he went on, the red-headed one with the big ears. We call him Junior on this ship, and oh, Jesus, does it make him mad. So tonight I called him Red once or twice, and I practically thought he was going to lick my hand or something like a puppy. She laughed and glanced over at the red-headed one. The boy lowered his eyes, blushing, looking about 14 years old. No, but it's funny, Tom said. When I talk to him, it's almost like talking to my own kid. He don't seem no older than that. I mean it. The kids you get in the Navy nowadays, it's like back in the war. She let him draw her closer and relaxed, turning with the music, thinking, Isn't he nice? I bet they do think it's a big deal when he's nice to them. And wasn't I silly to worry about the way they looked at me? They're only kids. Mary Lou and Al went back to the table when the tune ended, but Betty wanted to stay and dance some more. She hadn't danced in a long time, and Tom was a good dancer. The songs were all French, but that didn't matter. They were slow and rich, sung by girls with low, tearful voices, and they were nice to dance to. When they finally went back to the table, Betty found little shot glasses of whiskey beside their beer. Hey, what's this? We didn't order this. Shh, Al said, peering around Mary Lou. Santa Claus brought it. Well, I don't know, Betty said. Is it okay to drink it after all this beer? Al held up one finger and quoted solemnly, Beer on whiskey, pretty risky. Whiskey on beer, he wagged the finger. Never fear. After that, things got confused. They must have stayed in the Hollywood bar for another hour, maybe longer, dancing and drinking and talking. She wasn't drunk. She knew she wasn't drunk, but everything blurred together because she was having such a good time. Afterwards, it was hard to remember exactly what happened, except that when they left, Al got a taxi from somewhere, a big square taxi, and she and Tom rode on the jump seats. They drove along the promenade. On one side, the brilliant hotel fronts, some of them with tables outside and orchestras and white dinner jackets and girls with beautiful shoulders and beautiful evening clothes. And on the other side, palms and shrubs with colored floodlights hidden in the grass around them. And beyond them, the dark sea. Gee, Betty said, isn't it nice the way they fix it up at night? It's really beautiful. She turned around to ask Mary Lou if she didn't think so too. But Mary Lou and Al were a single shape in the back seat. All she could see was the big blur of Al's back, with one of Mary Lou's white arms slanting across it. Then they were back in the apartment and everybody was laughing, and Al setting up glasses for a bottle of scotch he'd picked up somewhere. She turned on all the living room lights, but somebody turned most of them off again and got some dance music on the radio. Shh, she said. Turn it down, will ya? I gotta check the kids. She tiptoed into the dark bedroom and looked at them, one by one. The twins dead to the world in their carriage, Bobby stirring a little as she tucked him in, Brenda buried in her pillow. When she got back to the living room, only Tom was there. "What happened to Mary Lou?" she asked him, and Al. He stood up from the couch with a drink in his hand, smiling. "I think they went up to her place to check her kid." "But her kid's here." "Well," Tom said with a little laugh, "I guess they just went up to take a look at her apartment or something. Come on, sit down." She knew it was going to happen then. Her throat tightened as she walked over to the couch, and the room seemed to roll like a ship in the slow groundswell. "Here," Tom said, "your drink's getting stale." His face was red, and the corners of his bashful mouth twitched a little under the mustache as he handed her the glass. "That's a real pretty dress you got, Betty." "Do you like it?" She smoothed the satin skirt over her thighs, sitting down beside him. "This is the first time I've worn it since Eddie, that's my husband, was home. We went to the movies." "Oh, yeah?" His eyes glittered at her. "We went to see this big Cary Grant picture that was in town. I forget the name of it. Only we didn't find out till we got there that the soundtrack was all in French." Her voice sounded high and choked, and she had trouble getting her breath. "Oh, yeah?" "The whole soundtrack was in French, and we couldn't understand a word of the whole picture." "Oh, yeah?" A muted piano waltz came from the radio, and the palms rustled outside. They both put their drinks down at the same time, and she knew it was going to happen. His hands were shy at first, and then they began to be sure, gentle but sure. "Don't, Tom," she said, turning her mouth away. "Don't, please." But nothing in the world could stop it from happening now. "They'll come back," she whispered. "No, they won't," he mumbled against her mouth. "Not if I know old Al, they won't." But she didn't really give in, couldn't, until she heard him say, "And anyway, I locked the door." Then she gave in, surprised at the whimpering animal gasps of her breath between kisses, locking her arms around the warm strength of his neck and giving in, not caring about anything else in the world. When it was all over, they lay silent for a long time until their breathing was normal again, and she waited for a rush of guilt to overtake her. But it didn't come. Even when she forced herself to think of Eddie, to picture his face, it didn't bother her. This didn't have anything to do with Eddie at all. With her finger, she traced the line of Tom's cheek, his smiling mustache, his rough chin. "Tom," she said. "Oh, Tom." She was beginning to feel breathless again. "I've just been lying here thinking about my husband, and you know what? I don't care. I just don't care about anything but us, Tom." "Yeah, I know," he said. "That's the way it is, all right. I don't care either." "Do you mean it? Do you mean it?" "Well, but Tom, what are we going to do?" He sighed. "It's just something we'll have to think about, honey. We'll just have to figure it out. You gonna miss me?" "You're not going." "I got to, Betty. I really got to. But I'll come back real soon as I possibly can." "Oh, don't go yet. Please stay a little while." But he got up, and in a few minutes he was ready, buttoning his trim tan blouse, straightening it, combing his hair. Then they finished their drinks and had another cigarette, and they both wrote out their full names and addresses very carefully and gave them to each other. He kissed her and played around a little, and she did everything she knew how to make him stay, but it was no use. He kept saying he had to go, whispering, fondling her, reassuring her, backing toward the door. "Soon as I possibly can, honey, and we'll talk about it. Now let's see a smile." And after a final kiss, she was alone. The important thing was to keep busy. She gathered all the glasses and ashtrays and rinsed them out and straightened up the room. She turned the radio off, then turned it on again. But she got into her pajamas and robe and spent a long time brushing her hair. 100 strokes on each side, the way she used to do before she was married. If she was going to regret it, this was the time to start. And if she wasn't, well, then she wasn't. It was as simple as that. She tiptoed in to check the kids again. They were all covered. The soft light from the door fell on Bobby's face, sweet and baby-like in sleep. And it made her smile to think how different it had been this afternoon. dirty and loud and wide awake. "Hey, Ma, what are you crying about?" Her eyes stung a little as she bent over the bed very gently and kissed him. She strolled back into the living room, moving gracefully, feeling loved and secure. She could write him tonight, "My darling Tom." But she was too tired. Tomorrow night would do, and maybe the next morning there would be a letter from him. Maybe that night he would come back. She stood at the tall windows for a long time looking out. The moon made a wide silver stripe on the sea, irregularly broken by the ships. Which one was Tom's? And the slick tops of the palm leaves glistened almost as if they were coated with ice. The word peace ran through her mind. Everything was at peace. Tom stopped for a cup of coffee in one of the late-night cafes near the pier. Looking into the bar mirror, the first thing he did was scrub the lipstick off his mouth with his handkerchief. He couldn't get it all off. It would take soap and water to get rid of the lingering pink glow. Then he saw in the mirror that the two kids were there at a table, Junior and his friend. They had their little white hats shoved down into their eyebrows, trying to look salty, and they were grinning and getting up to come over. "Look who's here," Junior said. "What do you say, Chief?" He was eager as a young bride. Tom looked around without smiling. "What the hell are you kids doing out so late? Too late for nice kids to be out." "What happened to your buddy?" Junior asked, grinning. "He find a home?" Tom looked narrowly at the boy and picked up his coffee. Any kid ought to know better than to talk to a chief that way. "What happened to your buddy, for God's sake?" But never mind. He'd get squared away quick enough, back on the ship. "How the hell should I know?" he said. "Don't act wise, Junior." That shut him up, but the other kid moved right in. "So how'd it go, Chief? You make it?" Tom put the cup down in its little saucer. "Son," he said, "any man couldn't make that ought to turn in his uniform." They both howled and slapped their thighs. Tom spread out the slip of paper Betty had given him and got out his address book. "One of you kids got a pen?" Two fountain pens were thrust upon him, open for action. He selected one and carefully transcribed the address into the book, Mrs. Betty Myers. Then he handed the pen back, dropped the paper on the floor, and waved the book in the air a few times before closing it to dry the ink. "Well, I see you're keeping her address anyway," Junior said. "Couldn't have been too bad if you're keeping her address." "Sure," Tom said. "Why not? She got your address?" It was such a stupid question that Tom played it along. "Sure," he said softly, looking at the kid with a slow smile, raising the cup to his lips. "Why not?" The boy exploded. "Oh, you want to watch that, Chief? You want to look out for stuff like that? Her husband will be in town one of these days." Still smiling, Tom put the cup down and shook his head from side to side. It was hard to believe. The kids you got in the Navy nowadays. "Oh, Jesus Christ, Junior. When are you going to grow up? What do you think? I told her my real name?"